The following program presents principles designed to promote good health and is not intended to take the place of personalized professional care. The opinions and ideas expressed are those of the speaker. Viewers are encouraged to draw their own conclusions about the information presented.
Hello and welcome to Health for a Lifetime. I'm your host, Don McIntosh, and today it's my distinct privilege to have with us Dr. McCarty. He's a doctor in ministry, and over the last 20 years, even more than that, I guess, you've been dealing with people in ministry and seeing them all kinds of situations. A minister, someone has said, is someone that works with people when they're hatched, when they're matched, and when they're dispatched. And you and I both share that together. As a matter of fact, we got to work together a few years ago. Right. One of the things I've noticed is that, during the happy times and whatnot, ministers, you can take them or leave them. But when there's stress and when there's problems, there's nobody else that people want than a minister. And I remember you and I talking one time, and you said to me, Don, you got to pay the rent. You got to take care of the things that are really important. And I think stress and the way we relate to it is very important. And that's why we're talking about the subject today. What exactly is stress?
Well, Don, stress has been referred to through the centuries as times of difficulty for people. But what's new today, and since the 1920s and 30s, is that we know there's a correlation between stress and health. It wasn't until 1926 when the first medical researcher wrote an article in which this correlation was demonstrated. And when he did that, there was no word to describe what he was trying to portray. He was trying to portray that the pressures of life damage our health and can damage our health, and they build to a danger point. And so he looked around for a word to use to describe this, and he chose strictus, a Latin term which was the measurement of the amount of pressure that could be placed on an object before it collapsed. It was an engineering term, actually, and he began to relate that, strictus, our word stress, to health. And since then, it's been gradually growing in the medical community, the understanding that there's a direct relationship between stress and health.
Sort of like a boa constrictor. So it just gets tighter and tighter, huh? That word strictus. Interesting. So in your seminar, which I've looked at, that's an excellent seminar, Beyond Coping, I think you've called that.
Right.
And it's been adopted by the General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists, as I understand. And you gave the lecture there at the 11th get together. What do they call that? The Congress of
11th International Congress on Stress.
Right. And in that, as I've looked at that, you have something called the stress tank. What exactly is that?
The stress tank is it came out of Australia, and it was a model. I was looking for a model as I put my seminar together that would show the relationship of the whole issues, all the issues of stress in one single graphic. The stress tank helped me do that. It starts out with a list of stressors. We're subjected to stressors every day of our life. If you think of your life as like a stress tank, or think of at least all of us have a stress tank in our lives, and that tank is being filled every day by various kinds of stressors, everything from strain and loss of job to financial trouble, relationship conflict, changes, worry, just your accumulation of little things. It all adds up to stress, and if the tank reaches the top, then that becomes serious.
So loss of job, trouble financially, relational conflicts, a whole bunch of illnesses, all these different things you have listed here. I have a man that I just was visiting a couple hours ago, actually, before we came here, and he had one health problem after another, after another, after another, and his cup was, I guess you'd say, running over in a bad sort of way.
Yep, that can happen. When we receive too much stress, we get too much stress in our lives, and we're not handling it properly, then it builds to the overload point. And at that point, various kinds of harm result. There's a breakdown of health. Medical researchers today are unanimous in saying that somewhere between 60 to 90% of all visits to physicians are health-related. The National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health estimates that 60 to 80% of all industrial accidents are stress-related. And relationships are affected adversely by too much stress. There's just so many harmful things that take place when we have too much stress.
So we really have to be careful when these types of things happen. This is the time to really pull together.
Right. There was a fascinating research done at the University of Chicago back in the 1970s. The Salvador Madai and Susan Kobasa, professors there at the University of Chicago, researched 246 executives of AT&T during a time when AT&T was breaking up. They were coming off, the government monopoly was over, and new companies were coming in, new phone companies were coming in. And the line on the graph, the red line, shows the amount of stress that these executives were experiencing. The green line, the lower line, shows the amount of illnesses and visits to doctors that occurred. The first 2 years when it looked like AT&T was going to, people were losing jobs and being transferred to positions where they weren't qualified for, the stress went up parallel, the visits to doctors went up parallel with the amount of stress. Fascinating.
So in other words, when they thought they were going to lose their job, they were all uncomfortable and everything, they started to get sick at the same rate as the stress was going up.
And then it leveled off for a couple of years, where it looked like AT&T had weathered the storm, and illnesses dropped dramatically.
So when they beat the competition, so to speak, or it looked like they were going to make it, they didn't get sick anymore.
Right. Then after that next couple of years, by about 1974 or 1976, it began to climb again for the next 6 years, parallel to the amount of stress that they were experiencing when they realized MCI and Sprint and these other companies were coming in, and they were going to be tough competitors. And so there's a direct correlation. I like that graph because it shows the direct correlation between stress and illness.
Stress and illness, there's a real correlation. So we've really talked about some harmful effects of stress. I mean, it's not just something to mess around with. You can't just say, oh, you're stressed out, everybody is. It's something you need to deal with.
That's right. But there's good news, too.
Well, yeah, let's get to the good news. What do we do to deal with it?
Well, if we go back to the stress tank,
we
find that there's a pressure relief valve on the stress tank, so to speak. So when pressure mounts to a high point, this pressure relief valve, in fact, the pressure relief valve, when it's fully open, can keep it from mounting to an extremely high point. And an acronym that I use for the keys there, the 7 keys to managing stress, is PREVENT. It prevents, when these keys are operative in our life in a balanced way, it prevents the buildup of stress to the harmful point.
So what are some of those keys?
Well, prayer, relaxation, exercise, viewpoint, eating healthily.
What do you mean by viewpoint?
Viewpoint is your attitude toward life. It's very, very important, extremely important. In fact, you can put these 7 keys into a hierarchical order. I've developed the stress pyramid, the stress management pyramid.
Okay.
And on the bottom of this pyramid, you have those that are that are less important, and at the very top you have the most important, and it works up in kind of a hierarchical fashion.
So eating healthily would be...
healthily is very important, but it's not more important than exercise for stress management.
Okay, so get out there and move, eat. This is a foundation,
That's right.
But it's
time
building.
management, good organization, even more important than that for stress management. Relaxation on all the stress management charts, important. Loving relationships is even more important yet. Immense amount of research demonstrating that. Viewpoint is your attitude toward life. Do you take a positive attitude toward life? Can you take negative things that happen? Can you see positive potential in those negative things that happen?
So last week when my truck got stuck in the mud, it was a 4-wheel drive. I was in Kansas, and I'm driving down the road in a 4-wheel. I think I'm invincible, and I get stuck, and I can't even move. And
I know you well enough, you laugh about it. Right?
Well, I got out and I sank down into the mud, and I said, oh, man. So I got back in my new truck. I had mud all over the truck. But you know what? I thought, man, this is a peaceful time to just be able to study. No one's going to interrupt me. I made a phone call, and 2.5 hours later, I had the best sermon illustration I've ever had.
That's exactly right.
So this is viewpoint.
That's what we're talking about when we talk about viewpoint, among other things. That's a very important part of it.
All right.
And then finally, the spiritual integration at the very top of it.
So
extremely important.
The spiritual prayer and whatnot. That's the top, the apex.
Exactly. And I had an experience one time done a number of years ago where I learned how important the spiritual component was. I was backpacking during the summer with my 3 sons. My oldest, Michael, was 10 years old. My second oldest, Andrew, was 7. And my youngest, Marcus, was 5. And we were up in the High Uinta area. We had packed in 3 miles from the trailhead. It was in a wilderness area. We had a lake all to ourselves. And my 2 oldest, Andrew and Michael, pitched a tent about 30, 40 yards into the woods from us, from Marcus and I, to kind of show their independence. They'd been out a number of summers now, and they could kind of do it on their own. And in the middle of the night, I woke up to a blood-curdling scream, and I recognized Andrew's voice. And that
terrified you. That
did.
Increased your stress level.
I grabbed my flashlight, zipped my bag open, shined the light through the trees, and I saw their tent moving a little bit. And of course, my adrenaline levels even went up farther.
I'm sure they did.
I raced out of my tent toward their tent, shining my flashlight to make sure that there weren't any predators around. I couldn't see anything. Then when I zipped their tent open, I knew exactly what had happened. Andrew woke up in the middle of the night. He didn't know where he was. He sat up, and his head hit the top of the tent, and then he knew he was in trouble. And he was pitch black, and now my light was shining in his face, so that wasn't helping matters. But if you could have seen his face, it was a look of abject terror. His adrenaline levels, his cortisol levels were sky high, and that's what stress is. Stress is a biochemical response to threatening circumstances. Anything we consider a threatening circumstance.
Even if it's not real, perceived or real.
Even if it's not real, that's exactly right. If it's just
and he was
perceived
terrified.
Terrified. And so immediately I recognized that the light shining in his face wasn't doing any good to anybody.
It was like a deer with the light in his face just kind of stationary.
Exactly. So I shined it back on my own face, just turned it back on my face so he could see my face. And in the next 30 seconds, this is what happened, or less than that. He just said 2 words, "Oh, Daddy." And his face totally melted into complete peace. Complete peace. He laid down and he was sound asleep within seconds. Seconds. And I went back to my bag that night and I thought, this is just awesome what's happened here. And I thought, this is exactly what the spiritual component is all about. Nothing could have reduced his stress level so quickly, so deeply as that experience. And because there was somebody that he knew, he trusted, and had confidence in, that was his protector at that time. And the spiritual relationship is developing a faith and trust in God over a period of time, everyday experiences. When the panic time comes, then
we know him face to face.
We know him, and we can. You still may panic, but then you remember, oh yes, my heavenly Father is here, and you can relax, and it's a powerful stress reliever.
And that's the ultimate stress relief valve. Wow.
Pressure relief valve, ultimate.
Andrew
right.
Doing fine now?
Doing great.
Does he camp that far away now?
We haven't been camping lately, but he's now a CPA in Denver.
Well, there he has different kind of stress. He probably calls Dad now and then and says, "What do I do now in this situation?"
He actually learned to handle things very well.
Well, so these 7 keys again then, eating healthfully, exercise, relaxation, time management, love relationships, viewpoint, spiritual integration. In your seminar, Beyond Coping, you probably develop these a lot further, don't you?
That's what we do. It's a 12-hour seminar, and we take each one of these keys and we show how they're related to stress management, among other things, but we just unpack them one
How
at
are
a time.
people responding to this? Is it helpful to them?
Fantastically. Fantastically. We just held a seminar. I just trained 90 people at Andrews University. They came in from around the country. The NAD sent them there, the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists, to be trained, and some seminary students were there, and just got wonderful response afterwards. And I spend most of my time now training trainers to be able to do these seminars.
And that must be gratifying. I'm sure they have all kinds of stories that ultimately they tell you, much like the story you just told us about Andrew, about how people's lives are changed.
Right.
We've been talking with Dr. Skip McCarty. He's a doctor in ministry, and he's been dealing with people in stressful situations for many years. And now he's at that time of life where he's able to help others know how to deal with this, both personally and in group settings. And we're excited about this material, but more than that, we're excited that you've joined us today. And when we come back, we want to look further at stress. What are some ineffective ways at coping with stress, and how can we avoid them? We hope you join us when we come back.
Have you found yourself wishing that you could shed a few pounds? Have you been on a diet for most of your life, but not found anything that will really keep the weight off? If you've answered yes to any of these questions, then we have a solution for you that works. Dr. Hans Deal and Dr. Eileen Ludington have written a marvelous booklet called Reversing Obesity Naturally, and we'd like to send it to you free of charge. Here's a medically sound approach successfully used by thousands who were able to eat more and lose weight permanently without feeling guilty or hungry through lifestyle medicine. Dr. Deal and Dr. Ludington have been featured on 3ABN, and in this booklet, they present a sensible approach to eating, nutrition, and lifestyle changes that can help you prevent heart disease, diabetes, and even cancer. Call or write today for your free copy of Reversing Obesity Naturally, and you could be on your way to a healthier, happier you. It's absolutely free of charge, so call or write today.
Welcome back. We've been talking with Dr. Skip McCarty. He's a doctor in ministry, and over the last 20 years he's been involved in ministry, dealing with people in many stressful situations. He's written a new seminar called Beyond Coping, Stress actually, Beyond Coping, and we're delighted that he can take time from his schedule to be with us today. Dr. McCarty, you know, we've been talking about the effective keys for coping with stress, and you've gone through 7 of those. Work us just through those again so those that are just joining us might catch up with us.
Okay. We were talking about the stress pyramid, and the keys are eating healthfully, exercise, time management, relaxation, loving relationships, viewpoint, and spiritual integration in that order, with the spiritual being the most important component of them. And those are research-based. That's a research-based hierarchy based on my research.
And in your seminar, you really develop these, and they unfold, and people begin to understand really what they all mean and how they relate to stress.
The key, Don, to managing stress is keeping these 7 components of managing stress in balance in our lives.
Are there ineffective ways? Are there people that they get stressed out and then they have ineffective ways of dealing with stress?
Interesting you would ask that, because the ways that people often cope with stress, caffeine, liquor, alcohol, use of drugs, smoking, addictive types of behavior, these are things that work short term for people, but in the long run they boomerang.
So I noticed that you use the acronyms CLOSE. Is this what you mean by that it just closes off the real effective?
Well, it closes the pressure relief valve. We've talked before about just a little earlier about the 7 keys to managing stress. Open the pressure relief valve, drain the stress tank to a safe level. These behaviors that we've just talked about, caffeine, alcohol, nicotine, those type of things, they close the pressure relief valve.
Ultimately, it doesn't seem like it, but ultimately it's just...
in the long run, they close it, so stress builds, and we're not really managing stress healthy.
Do different people relate differently to stress? I mean, can I relate to more stress than you, or you more than me, perhaps, in some setting?
People can handle different amounts of stress, and I illustrate this on the stress tank by the size of the tank. Some people have larger stress tanks. They can deal with more stress at any one time in their lives. And there are various ways that the size of our stress tank are created. The only one that we don't have control over is our endowment, our heredity that's given to us. But the others, a condition of our health, our relationships, there's an element called executive hardiness, our attitudes, our beliefs, our type A, type B personality. We can do something about all of those things. And all are ways to create larger
stress. And that's just kind of how we're created, how we're built. Some people, I know my wife can really tolerate certain types of stress quite a bit. I mean, for instance, I'm probably one of her major stressors, right? In a sense, I'm just joking with that. But there are some things that she really, really, really does well with. There are some things that she doesn't do as well with that I do better with. I mean, that's why
background can be a big part of that.
We kind of, I don't know, balance each other out. When I'm down, she's up, and so we work well together. I noticed something there, though, executive hardiness. I'd like to have that. What is that? I mean, it sounds good.
You remember that chart we looked at, or that graph we looked at a short time ago when AT&T was studied by these professors at the University of Chicago?
Oh, yeah, we have it right here.
As the stress levels rose, except for a 2-year period when stress had leveled out, the illnesses rose parallel to the stress levels.
Okay. There
was 246 executives at AT&T that were studied. Well, there was a group of those executives that did not follow that pattern. They maintained good health through that whole period of time. And there were three characteristics that Salvador Madai and Suzanne Kobasa discovered among those executives that maintain good health. And they called them the big three. They wrote a book afterwards called The Hardy Executive, Health Under Stress. And those characteristics were, first of all, control. There are 3 C's, the big three. Control. The executives that maintain good health during that period of time, even though the AT&T was firing some of them, others were being moved to jobs they weren't even trained for or whatever. There was a very distressful time. They kept reminding themselves AT&T did not have control of their lives. They could fire them, but there were other jobs out there, and they had been trained well, and they could get other jobs if they wanted to. Control was a big factor. Just their sense that I'm still in control of my life. That sense of being in control was one of the factors that helped them.
And you think that was a choice they made?
It was a choice. And it's an attitude that you carry with you about life. That when you get into a stressful situation, you still have control of your life. The second characteristic, the second C that they found was challenge. They accepted these changes taking place, traumatic changes taking place in their life, as a challenge. It's very interesting, the Chinese word for crisis is a compound word made up of 2 words. One is danger, the other is opportunity.
Neat.
And I heard that, I read that one time, and so I talked to a Chinese student at Andrews University. I said, is this true? He went and got his Chinese dictionary and showed me. Absolutely true. The word for crisis in Chinese is made up of danger and opportunity. Those 2 words, it's a compound word.
So this is kind of, explain what it means then.
What it means for stress management, and what it meant for these executives that were not getting ill as stress levels rose, was that they looked upon the changes taking place that were quite threatening. If you got fired you're with a career for a long time, you thought you may be there to retirement, and you're suddenly fired because of changes taking place in society, that can be quite threatening. They looked at that as an opportunity, as a challenge. And stress management is being able to look at every stressful situation as an opportunity. I had an experience just a short time ago. I was giving a presentation at Willow Creek Community Church in Chicago. They asked me to come down and talk. It was a group of maybe 30 staff members there, the lower level staff members of that huge congregation. They have like 500 staff members. But I gave a 1-hour presentation one day, 1-hour presentation the next day. The second day, and the first day I brought up these 3 C's and explained the 3 C's, and challenge being one of them, and every stressful situation is an opportunity. The second day, as we came back to our session, a lady raised her hand and she said, I've got to tell you this story. On my way home from work last night, I was on the freeway in Chicago, and my car broke down.
That's stress.
So I got on my cell phone.
Okay.
And I called my husband.
All right.
And he said, honey, I'm just putting my golf clubs in the car. I'm going golfing, get the car fixed.
Oh, man. Sounds like a very sensitive guy.
Well, she said, ordinarily, I would have gone through the roof. That would have been war. But I thought, this is a challenge. This is an opportunity. Somewhere there's an opportunity here. So she called and found out there was a service company close by that
took care of cars off the highway.
For her car.
Yeah.
And they got her right in there. She got the car fixed. She was home by the time before her husband got home from golfing, she was home. The car was in the garage. He drove in the driveway, drove in the garage. He didn't come in for some period of time.
Sure he didn't.
Then he came in, and his first words to her were, they didn't fix the car right. And she said to the class, she said, that would have that was a war statement to me.
Sure
war statement.
Was.
But she said, honey, let me tell you the story. And she said, God was so good, because when the car broke down, there was a service repair person close by, came right out, got the car. We got the car fixed. It's running fine. And if it's not perfect, it's still running fine. She said immediately his whole attitude, his whole spirit changed. She said, we had a wonderful evening together instead of an evening of war, which we would have had otherwise. So looking at stressful situations as an opportunity, as a challenge, is a second characteristic they found in those 3 C's. And the third one was something called commitment.
Commitment.
And that was that these executives that maintain good health while all these changes were taking place, these executives were committed to certain values, and they said, AT&T can't change our values. We're committed to these. We're committed to these people in our life, the important people in our life, and they can't change those things. Control, challenge, commitment. were keys to their health.
So remembering the 3 C's.
The 3 C's.
Is control, challenge and commitment.
Yep, that's executive hardiness.
Well, we have about 3 minutes left, and I don't mean to stress you out with that, but is there anything more we should know about stress or the stress tank?
Well, there is one other element to this.
Okay.
The stress tank, we know that too much stress, overloaded stress, can cause various kinds of harm. We've been talking about that. But one of the interesting things that research has brought out about stress is you can have too little stress.
Okay.
In fact, Dr. Hans Selye, the father of stress management, the one who wrote the first article in 1926, the one that wrote the first book in 1950 on stress, he believed that too little stress is actually more harmful than too much stress. Mm-hmm. And so you'll notice that the pressure relief valve on the stress tank does not drain the stress levels all the way down to the bottom, but because we need some stress.
Okay.
And that's distress, that's harmful stress. The positive stress in our life is called eustress. Comes from the little word eu, or the little prefix eu, is a Greek prefix coming from, it means good. And eulogy means speaking well of somebody. Euphoria is feeling of well-being. We need a certain amount of stress in order to have
so we need to be right in the middle of that cup.
We need to have some stress. Now there's stress not to have, and there's stress that's valuable to have. Mm-hmm. And the stress not to have is the Bible has a whole lot of counsel, commandments that prevent us from having that if we keep them, we'll be protected from stress that has no real purpose.
So the commandments like thou shalt have no other gods before me. If we have a multiplicity of gods, it'll confuse us, or steal.
Exactly.
Don't commit adultery. That gets you into a lot of stress.
A lot of stress that we're being protected from. However, keeping those same commandments will at times cause stress. It'll create stress. So people will turn against us, and that's the kind of stress that we want. Eustress is positive stress, beneficial stress.
So coming out of Egypt, getting out of the bad situation, that was stressful, out of their comfort zone, but then here are the things too.
Right. Exercise is putting yourself under stress. Mm-hmm. Setting goals, working to achieve goals. These are positive stress, valuable stress that we need in our lives.
The name of the seminar is Beyond Coping, or Stress Beyond Coping. We've been talking with Dr. Skip McCarty. These are resource materials that I know you would greatly benefit from. We hope that today's program will give you a sense of control, will challenge you, and will also lead you to make commitments that you need to God and to others as you start to understand more fully these 7 keys. We hope that you also have health that lasts for a lifetime.